Robert, coming off what you've been doing for the last decade or so, you could have chosen a myriad of movies, and you're producing your own movies, you're doing this stuff. Why Dolittle?
I think we were getting ready to do the last two Avengers movies, and I was kind of thinking ahead, and I knew there'd be some wide open spaces, and this came up, and Susan had connected with Steve Gaghan and Joe Roth, and they're all pretty blue chip folks. And then I read it, and then I sent him a picture of this crazy Welsh doctor named William Price, and he said, "I love it. I love it. Let's go a little wild with it, and then we'll, and then the animals will clean them up." I was like, "Yeah." So right from the beginning, we just had one of those great first conversations, and then 2 years later, as usual, here we are, and we're promoting it, and it turned out pretty darn good.
So for the benefit of those who hear Dolittle and either think Rex Harrison or possibly Eddie Murphy,
sure,
who is this John Dolittle?
Well, in this iteration, he is a one-time royal consultant, veterinarian, and also had some relationship with the Queen, the young Queen Victoria. But he's fallen into personal disrepair. He suffered a loss. His wife was a great adventurer, and through a series of circumstances, she passed away. So he's become a recluse. And I also love the idea of someone who's a complete hermit and agoraphobic, just never wants to deal with people again. Kind of the exact opposite of Tony Stark, to be honest. And then because of this young lady from court and this boy who didn't want to hurt an animal, he was not even trying to hunt, but accidentally injured. So I always love that. Any story that says what happens today that's never happened before is these two individuals, Stubbins and John Dolittle. They've probably been living within a couple miles of each other his whole life, and yet they meet on this day, and it takes an interesting and adventurous turn.
Obviously, there are a lot of animals in the movie, digitally created, but right there, emotional arcs of their own, little character quirks of their own. You have a little bit of experience with special effects, some. How was the experience of this one? Was it different techniques? Was it just you playing with your imagination and having to sort of conjure them out of the air sometimes?
Well, because that long bench of talent would be adding the voice and the real specificity to the character after the fact, it was kind of like just water painting what we would imagine some of these different personalities to be like. Because, I mean, you'd say the same thing about every pet we've ever had a personality that we could pinpoint over others. And so all these animals have their own frequency and their own quirks and all that. I'm glad you said arcs, because the most important thing is if you don't feel the animals themselves wind up somewhere different than where they started, then it hasn't been much of a journey. So,
talking of that sort of thing, what are you hoping people take away from the movie?
Well, I always just want folks to be entertained. In watching it myself, and I'm a fairly harsh critic, I just feel that we succeeded in that kind of messaging of, some people are saying empathy and communication, but I always love this idea too that like things can seem like they're a certain way for a certain reason, and we tend to sometimes hold ourselves in judgment for things that have happened in our lives, but just what winds up occurring during this adventure is everyone becomes kind of whole, and the bad guys get it, but not that badly, and it's a very, very, very different take on family entertainment than I've noticed in the last bunch of years. And I'm a big fan. Like, I love watching movies with my kids. This feels a little more to me like the sensibility of some of the films I grew up watching.
So final question, you made the choice, as you said, to play him as Welsh, based on this inspiration of this doctor.
Yes.
You're doing a Welsh accent in a film partly shot in Wales in front of people like Michael Sheen.
Yeah.
Does that scare you at all? Does that worry you at all?
It is the most mortifying thing I've ever done. Fortunately, I had a dialect coach who called in a Welsh coach, and by the time Michael Sheen told me that a couple of his friends heard it and said I was all right, it was like, it was like the sun rose for the first time in 2 years.